thank you for coming. Thank you for sticking around. I'll make this go super fast because I know everybody wants to get out skiing and get some lunch. Before I get into that, though, I wanted to share a little bit about my background. When I started at 97th Floor, I remember showing up for my interview, and I couldn't find the office. And I asked around the building where they were in, and nobody had heard of 97th Floor. And I'm picturing 97th Floor, like this giant, sexy New York ad agency, right? And no one in this building knows who they are. And so I'm like, okay, fine. Well, and I'm just going to leave because I can't find it. But then I peek around, and there's some steps leading down to a basement, and this little logo that says 97th Floor. And I was like, oh, that's it. I walk in. There's no reception. We were just a very different company back then. And Mastermind is fun for me to take a step back and see like how far we've come in such a short period of time. And a little bit, this keeps falling asleep. I want to share with you a little bit about what we've built here at 97th Floor. And this mix between art and science. And this is my conflict because I was always, I started at BYU as an accounting major. But then I shortly realized that I would probably not survive very long just doing numbers and spreadsheets. And so then I switched and I was a film major. And I was like, I probably won't be able to feed a family as a film major. So then I switched to advertising because I felt like that gave me the mix of the both. And that's kind of at 97th Floor what we have is always this conflict between creativity and art and then the science and the data. And I think that's a healthy conflict. And that's some stuff that I want to share with you. This doesn't seem to be working here. Okay. So Content Marketing Institute, they did a study of people in our industry, and they found, like, what are the things that vex us the most? What are our biggest problems? They said the number one response was the lack of time. We don't feel like we have enough time to do our jobs. Number two is the ability to produce enough content. And then number three is the ability to produce content that engages. So I find this interesting, and I want to know, like, why? Why those three things? And I think I have a little bit of the answer. And there's this relationship, right? There's the boss and there's the marketer. And the boss isn't always like the CEO. The boss is sometimes the CMO. Sometimes the boss is yourself, and this is an internal conflict. But the boss wants viral content. Like they saw a competitor have something that went viral, or maybe you're competing against past success, and you're just like, I want to replicate that. Give me viral content. So the content marketer, right? It's like, well, what does that mean? You know, like, I would love to stop using the term viral because viruses spread against the will of the user, of the recipient, right? Viruses spread whether we like it or not. In fact, we do not want it to spread, and it spreads anyway. And so when we use the word viral, when we talk about our marketing, we're so focused on the spreading and not focused enough on what will make people's lives better. What do our markets want, right? And so I think that's part of the reason why there's a problem. And so we go to work trying to create some content that goes viral. And we all do this right before we hit publish or submit or whatever. We say, dear marketing gods, we say a little prayer, please let this be the one that goes viral. And we send our baby off in the universe. And of course, because we're aiming for virality, it misses the target. And we do that over and over again. We do it with videos, blog posts, white papers, infographics, a lot of content. In fact, 60 to 70% of B2B content goes completely unused, wasted. It sits there on a server, never to be seen ever by anybody again. And think about all the time and effort and sweat equity put into creating that content. What a huge waste. And because of this, only 9% of marketers actually think their marketing is working. That's nuts. That's crazy. And only half of us feel highly proficient in our jobs. That's so sad. What if half of surgeons felt highly proficient in their jobs? There'd be a lot of dead people. You know, that'd be a huge problem. And I think this is a huge problem in our industry. So I think the answer is actually in that third thing. And I think it's almost a problem that that's our third response, not our first, which is the ability to produce content that engages. Because if we could produce content that engages, we wouldn't have to do as much of it. And we don't have to do as much. We have more time on our hands. We can invest in producing even more engaging content. Ad Age just did a study where they measured brands over a 2-year-long period. And they compared the second 12-month period against the first. And they found that in the second 12-month period, the brands that they were measuring produced 3 times more content than they had in the previous 12 months. Interestingly, though, the total engagement for all content totaled up stayed the exact same between the first and the second period. And during that measurement time, only 5% of the content that these brands created generated 90% of the total engagement. So clearly there's a lot of waste happening in our industry as it pertains to content. So going back to this idea of analytics and art and science, if we only use data, then and we only engage that part of ourselves, right, the analytics, then that creates really boring content. That's where white papers come from, is just pure data, like really boring stuff. If, however, we don't engage the data side and we only engage the creative side, we get what I'm calling the Kobe Bryant effect. We had an intern. We had an internship program that, frankly, was a terrible idea. The way we did it back then was we would get all of our interns together and just say, just give us some awesome ideas. Like, what do you guys think would be awesome? You know, because we wanted to get some cool creative ideas. And one of them said, well, just get Kobe Bryant and put him on a billboard. He's going to be dunking. It's going to be awesome. It was like, yeah, that is awesome. You know, that's really cool. But, like, how much does Kobe Bryant cost? And you're only going to put him on one billboard? Like, what a waste. And does our market even like Kobe Bryant? We don't know, you know. So we don't want to just engage that side of ourselves either. So I think there's this relationship between gathering data, letting it process, and coming out the other end. David Ogilvy has this quote that I really like, where he says, "Big ideas come from the unconscious. However, your unconscious has to be well-informed, or your idea will be irrelevant. So stuff your conscious mind with information, then unhook your rational thought process." So there's this unconscious part of ourselves that's always chewing on problems. This is what causes us to have those aha moments, like in the shower, or you're eating your cereal or whatever, right? It's because your brain is always chewing on problems, whether you're conscious or not, right? So if we can fill that unconscious part of ourselves with the data, it's going to start crunching it, whether we're aware of it or not. And my theory is that the more data you can get, the better the creative ideas come out on the back end. So the question, it becomes no longer, how can I be more creative? It's how can I get more data and basically bathe my brain in more data. And this is so important because I think as marketers, our biggest problem that we face is going off of our hunches and our guts. We think, what do we think would be awesome? What do we think would be cool? What do we think would be funny? And none of that matters. It doesn't matter what we think. We're not the market, right? And our sphere of experience is so limited, even though it doesn't feel that way. But as humans, like, if you, what we can experience and know is so small. And so data can help augment that sphere of experience, right? So how can we tap in to that source of knowledge, right? How can we tap into that data so we can augment our ability to perceive and understand what other people are experiencing and feeling, which will then help us create content that resonates with that audience. So I'm going to go through 5 things. The main point of what I'm sharing today is stuff that 97 Floor has been working on. So a lot of this comes with some updates to 97 Floor, so it's high-level stuff and then some what we've been doing. TF-IDF analysis. This is the basic search engine, right? We've got the search engines, they organize web pages, there's something that happens in a black box and they come out ordered after a query. So what happens in that black box? Well, TF-IDF is part of that algorithm. This is how Google understands what web pages are about. This is how it understands themes and topics. And essentially what it's doing is it's counting terms, it's finding out which terms are important, and then based on those terms it figures out what topics that paper covers, or that web page covers. And then it's also able to determine how comprehensive that page is. The reason this is important is because Google wants to provide its users with the most comprehensive content possible, right? They want people to search for what they're looking for, find it, and be done, right? They don't want you to hunt and peck and have a hard time finding. So they're going to favor content that they consider to be comprehensive over content that they consider to be not comprehensive because it's better for their users. So then we need to use that in reverse and figure out, what does Google think that this topic is about, and what does Google think is comprehensive, and then we can make our content adding those missing topics and phrases into our content and make it better in Google's eyes, more comprehensive in their eyes. And we should see rankings increase dramatically as a result. In fact, these are 2 examples. I've redacted the client stuff. But here is when we implemented the TF-IDF changes. They were getting about 30,000 organic searches a week. And within 2 weeks of implementing these changes, it doubled, almost doubled to about 60,000, it was about 58,000 a week within 2 weeks. So you can see how powerful this is. Another website, this is brand new content. We implemented the changes here. And again, within 2 weeks, we more than doubled their weekly organic traffic. And this is just one page. This isn't the whole site, just the one page. So this is very powerful stuff. It's very boring, very tedious. When we first started this, I started having marketers do this like 3 years ago, and they would actually have to go and copy and paste web pages and all the content on it, throw them into word counters, pull that data out, and smash it together and analyze it. It was terrible. So we've released and we've built some new software, and this is we're calling Solana. So Solana basically analyzes the web pages and figures out what Google thinks is important for a particular SERP. And the beautiful thing is it can run 5 reports at once. You just need to enter in the URL and the 5 keywords that are important to you. And this is the data it spits out. It tells you which topics you're insufficient on, what topics you need to add, and then also talks about things that everyone else is talking about but you're not talking about. And those are like the huge golden, that's the low-hanging fruit. Because if we add those topics, then suddenly we're going to be more comprehensive in Google's eyes and rankings will shoot up almost every time. So that's Solana. Keyword research. We had a demo on this. Keyword research is the foundation for every, in my opinion, SEO campaign, but I think it should be for every content marketing campaign. It's crucial for PPC. Google gets over 1 trillion queries a year, right? These are people typing in like their hopes, dreams, and desires. They're trying to find something, right? It's what they want. So that information is very, very powerful and important. And interesting, of those 1 trillion, 15% every single year have never been searched for before in the history of Google. 15% of 1 trillion every year. So not only is this such a valuable database of information, it's also a never-ending well. There's always going to be new things. And so you should never stop doing keyword research. It'll never be complete, which is awesome for us as marketers. And like I said, it applies to SEO, PPC, obviously, but UX design, market research, content marketing, website development. There are people that I know that have started businesses based on holes that they found in keyword research that are super successful, right? So this is the process, very high level, very high level. So we want to find keyword ideas, gather those metrics, and these metrics are going to be volume, conversion rate, competition, and we need to measure how relevant that word is to our business. And then we're going to analyze those keywords. So like I said, very high process, high view process, and then we need to group them by intent. So basically we're going to pull data on thousands of keywords. The key here is to pull as much as you possibly can. And what has prevented people from doing this in the past is, yeah, you can pull data on 300,000 keywords, but how can you possibly analyze that? We have all the metrics that we need, but to dig through 300,000 keywords is going to be virtually impossible. And so to help with that, well, we used to use stuff like SpyFu, Ahrefs, and we would put them in spreadsheets that look just like this. We built some templates that allows us to analyze it quickly. However, there are some limitations here. As anybody who was in the workshop knows, like Google Sheets has some limitations in terms of their processing power. And this is still, while this made keyword research a lot faster and a lot more accurate, this is still kind of a long process. And so we're in the process of building some software to do this, and that we're calling Palomar. So the idea with keyword research in this software that we're building is all you need to do is put in your URL and then all the competitors and a couple publishers, and it will go and find everything that they're ranking for, pull in all that data, analyze that data, and say, here are the best keywords. And then the marketer just simply needs to go through and check which ones they consider to be relevant. And then it will search the database for any other keywords that match similar intents from the ones that were selected by the marketer. And then it will group all of them based on intent, and then you will now pop out with, here are 15 keywords that you should create a landing page on. Here are 15 keywords that you should create a blog post about. and it will group them based off of intent. So we're taking a process. We're going to be able to analyze much more data than we have in the past in a much quicker fashion. It's going to be even more accurate than before. And there's one thing that I forgot to mention. So this software is for internal employees at 97th Floor primarily. So we're not becoming a software company. The idea is not to start selling this. It's to allow our teams to have access to that data so they can produce better work for our clients. That's the whole point of this. And regarding TF-IDF analysis keyword research, I want to share with you a little experiment that we did. And PJ doesn't know I'm talking about this, but this is a credit to PJ. So we work with a pretty large Fortune 500 client out in the East Coast, and we were having a little bit of conflict between their marketing team and then their content team in terms of what we should produce. And they wanted to do stuff that was editorially great and awesome and like very much in their voice, and that's awesome. However, they didn't want to use the data in the production, and I'm talking about keyword research and TF-IDF analysis. So we did a study where they released 5 blog posts and we released 5 blog posts, and we measured the differences because we released them right at the same time. And we found some interesting things. Pages written by the 97th Floor team earn or rank for 5% or 5 times more keywords than the stuff written by their internal content team. Stuff produced by 97th Floor earns 12 times more organic traffic than stuff written by their internal content. And all this is within 1 week, so it's a very short time period. Our best page ranks for 141 keywords after 1 week of being posted and no promotion. And their top one is 36 keywords after a week of no promotion. And then we started to build some links to both the control group and ours. And we found that articles that were written by 97th Floor saw a 400% increase in performance after having been promoted. And those in the control group saw no increase in performance after being promoted. And when I say performance, I mean specifically traffic generated to that blog post. So you can see the power of using the data in the art of creating great content, right? Marketing automation, this is something, we don't have any software coming out for marketing automation. We're not going to compete with HubSpot or any of that. However, we are now a HubSpot certified agency building that out. We brought on Doc to do some marketing automation for us because it's such a great fit with what we were currently doing. We were really, really great at getting people into this funnel and attracting an audience. And Doc is helping us build out some stuff to where we can now push them down the funnel with the content that we can create. And this was my idea of marketing automation when we first brought Doc on, right? You've got the funnel, they go through the funnel, become a customer, great, neat and tidy. This is what I thought of as marketing automation. And it caused me sometimes with Doc to be like, Doc, let's just get it done. This should be really fast, right? This is what was in my head. And Doc very patiently explained to me that this is not what marketing automation is. This is what marketing automation is. And this is something that Doc has built out. This is one funnel with multiple variations based off of the actions of a specific person, right? It gets very, very, he's basically a programmer is how complex this is. And what this allows us to do as it pertains to content is the content will shift and morph and change depending on who that person is, what they've done in the past, and what their next step should be. So calls to action, headlines, everything can change if marketing automation is built out. So now suddenly we're not creating one piece of content, but we're creating many variations for the many types of people that will come to your site. And I think this represents for us a more holistic and in-depth view of understanding the markets that we're talking to. Content gaps. So this is a great thing to do, and this all credit goes to Josh Moody. Josh Moody, he heads our R&D department. Basically, he's just experimenting stuff and trying new stuff all the time, and we get really cool insights from him. And this is one thing that Josh built out that we find super helpful. He will take a client, and we usually do this when we prospect, when they're coming on. He'll take a client, take all their pages, and then find every single keyword that every single one of those pages ranks for, and then organizes them. And he organizes it based off of the potential that each keyword or each page has. So you can see this first page here, there are 103 words that rank in spots 4 through 10, but that represents about 106,000 visits per month. So obviously that would be a great place to start. But then he does this for page 2 rankings and page 3 and beyond. And then we obviously we pull out anything that's related to brand. And so this is great. This gives us low-hanging fruit. It tells us where to go next and really helps us focus on what are going to bring the biggest wins first. And I recommend everybody do this. However, so we've created some software that helps us with this that we're calling Hoya. And that software not only allows us to analyze our us, but it allows us to analyze our competitors. So we're running the same report, but we're doing it for competitor after competitor after competitor, and then it smashes all of that data together, right? So it's very simple. It takes a very short amount of time to run that, and then you can blacklist keywords to pull out any branded keywords so that it doesn't run into this analysis. But then basically it does that same thing. It smashes all the data together and then shows what are the low-hanging fruit opportunities for that industry. And so essentially what that allows you to do, or will allow your marketers to do for you, is find the low-hanging fruit of not just you, but the low-hanging fruit that your competitors have, that they are not even aware that they have, and you can snatch it before they become aware that it's low-hanging fruit. So it's extremely powerful and allows us to invest time, again, very efficiently and provide the biggest results possible. I'm going to end on competitive research. This is one of my favorites. David Ogilvy again said, advertising people who ignore research are as dangerous as generals who ignore decodes of enemy signals. And I think that's so true. Because in advertising and marketing, we wield so much power, so many dollars of budget, and if we ignore the data that we have access to, we have potential to really burn stuff to the ground. So again, going back to the algorithm, like what happens inside of that. So Google uses ranking metrics, right, to rank sites. And of those, some of them are unknown. We know what our metrics are. We know what our click-through rate is, our time on site, user engagement metrics. We know that stuff. However, we don't know that for our competitors, and we won't be able to, at least legally. But there are so many other metrics that we do know. And so we need to figure out how do we double down and gather all of that information that we do know and use that to our advantage. So I'm going to take a trip back in time for a second. I was really, really obsessed with this idea probably like 4 or 5 years ago. I came across a story to help illustrate this idea, and I'm going to tell that story to you. Fort Ticonderoga, it was built during the French and Indian War and then kind of abandoned. And then during the War of Independence, the British occupied it and held that fort. And so the revolutionaries wanted that fort. In fact, Benedict Arnold, before he became Benedict Arnold, it says that he rode his horse by the fort and noticed that they had some big guns and wanted to capture the fort. So he started to amass kind of some supplies in an army to take over the fort. So he saw those guns. So he spent more time amassing forces than he spent understanding the fort. He literally just rode past it on his horse, noticed the guns, and wanted to take it. So he started his plan, right? So enter the hero here, Noah Phelps. He dressed up as a barber and went into the fort offering shaves and selling fake wares, right? And in doing that, he was able to learn about the fort and the people in it. And he learned 2 crucial pieces of information. One, that 1 week from that day, reinforcements would be arriving to bolster the forces of the fort. And they were very short-handed. There were not a lot of people in the fort at the time. And then the second thing is, all their gunpowder, because it had rained and their gunpowder was exposed, all of it was wet, and they couldn't fire. Noah Phelps then assembled a small troop of 18 and 19-year-old boys called the Green Mountain Boys, and they went at night and overtook the fort. Not a single shot was fired, not a single person died or was injured. They walked straight up to the commander's office and demanded that he surrender the fort, and boom, it went into, we captured the fort. The Americans captured the fort. So you can see, it was thanks to his competitive research, and all the effort and time he spent doing the research meant that he didn't have to have all the effort and time and resources and casualties of the execution. And I think sometimes we tend to favor execution, just get it done, let's just do it, instead of figuring out how can we go be really smart about this. We even built out, and PJ helped me build this, a formula that told us what links we need to build and how many and of what quality, instead of just going nuts with links. So this is kind of part of the stuff that came out. This is the spreadsheet that I would have all my marketers fill out. And they had to do this back then by hand. A competitive analysis, a full competitive analysis would take 35 hours. It was not fun. However, it would allow us to, for every hour that we spent doing competitive research, we could spend 1 hour, 2 hours less on execution because we were able to produce campaigns and strategy that were so effective. However, 35 hours is crazy. That's nuts. I was a bit of a dictator, I guess, when I had my team. So we've built software for this again. This one we're calling Vista. So what Vista allows you to do is connect all of that data together very quickly and glean those insights in a fraction of the time. So it allows you to run 5 competitive research reports at once, and it pulls back all this data. It shows the average and where you compare to the top 10 so that you can formulate a strategy very quickly. So it takes what used to take us 35 hours to do, we can now do in 5 minutes. And just as an example, we've also built in kind of a new feature into that tool as of last week that shows us not just the quantity of links that our competitors are getting, but also the quality and the type, so that we can build very targeted campaigns. Instead of just throwing a ton of links at it, we can do very specific targeted links that are built in a certain way as to have the largest effect possible. So overall, I'm going to end a bit early so we can get into lunch and get into skiing. If you find yourself in that half of marketers that don't feel highly proficient, or in that crazy 91% of marketers that don't feel like marketing is actually working, I think it's good to take a step back and think about this. Think about, are you consuming enough data? Are you getting enough data, or are you going off of your gut for all your decisions? Is there a way to gather more data and let that inform your content in a better way? Because what that allows us to do is tap into the hearts, minds, and souls of our market and give them stuff that actually makes their lives better, that makes the world a better place, that makes the internet a better place. Because if you do that, that just makes them happy. That builds brand affinity. That makes lifelong, super loyal customers, right? If we stop thinking about ourselves, we start thinking about them. And so that's my challenge to you. Think about your market. Gather that data and give them what they want and make the internet a better place. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paxton. We're going to open up to Q&A. We'll, again, raise your hand. We'll have someone with microphones come right on over to you. Or do we not have that? Never mind. You'll speak loud, and then Paxton will just respond or answer the question. Anyway, right here.
I have a two-part question. So I love this idea of like art science, and when you have a very specific brand, like being creative to speak to that brand. But what are your thoughts on optimization and pulling like additional data to put into that content and not taking away from that creative voice? And then also like using softwares and stuff like Bryant, that's what we use.
Mm-hmm.
And doing that TF-IDF analysis, and then how do you balance in between your intuition and the data?
So I think Wayne and I have actually had some arguments and debates about this over the years, and we settled in a cool spot, I think, a couple weeks ago, where we were talking about intuition and what that really is. And I think we settled on, like, our brains are just gathering information 24/7. Right now, I'm gathering information, you guys are gathering information, right? And to a level that we don't even understand consciously. And where intuition comes from is just that data. Our brains is kind of, it's that unconscious part of ourselves that has figured something out, right? So I think there's value to that. In regards to the quality of the content and like brand voice and that kind of stuff and the data, I think the best solution is to either have those two people working very closely together or have them be the same person. We've had a lot of success teaching our writers how to do TF-IDF analysis themselves. So they're actually in the data, and then they switch and do the creative work as writers, and that's been really successful. So there is kind of a line to be walked between the two, but neither should be forsaken. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we have a question right here. The microphone.
At what point in the 97th floor do you guys determine to divert your IT resources to building the type of software that's going to help your marketing program? Just something we notice at our company is we do a lot of that manual data mining, but it's hard to pull the trigger to divert resources away from other projects to help the marketing, be able to develop those types of programs.
I think as long as you've made a business case doing it manually, that's when it's ready to pull the trigger. So I would say the way you're doing it now is the great first step. Is like we're doing this manually, and we've proven that it's successful, and we've proven that it affects the bottom line in a certain degree. So I would say software should only come in when it's like we know the outcome once we build the software that it's going to be great. This is just a matter of saving time. So I think once you've proven that it works, then the natural next step is to build it out.
Okay. We had another question. I guess we'll go in the back. Wait for the microphone. Just 1 second.
So for the tools that you guys are building, where's the data coming from? Are you like tapping into APIs of other tools, or?
Yeah, so we're tapping into several APIs. Google has a few APIs that we're pulling for things like page speed. We are using Ahrefs and SpyFu, both their APIs, and then we've also built a crawler that does some other tasks. That crawler will go and count words and look for keywords and stuff like that. So it's a combination of a lot of different APIs and then our own crawler that analyzes that data, pulls that data, I should say. Yeah.
Okay. We got 2 more. I think 1 here, and then we'll have the last one right here. So let's go back here.
So how do you balance analysis by paralysis by analysis and doing too much research? I mean, in your example with Ticonderoga, they could have sat on that, or they could have acted really quick. How do you balance that? And then also, I would say, as part of that, how do you? Well, I guess this was sort of answered on the intuition thing, but like so often the people we're reporting that data to, they've got their gut and they trust that a lot more, and they feel like, oh well, you only talked to 20 people, so you don't know anything, or you only looked at 100,000 keywords, not 300,000. So that's kind of a 2-part question there.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things in there, and one is going to be the quality of the data that you're dealing with, which requires a skill set that not a lot of people have, of cutting to the heart of what data is important and what isn't, and what the data is actually saying by existing, because that's also not always super clear. And so I think if you can somehow cut to that and find the good quality data, that's really important. And then I would also say if you find yourself in that period where you've consumed a lot of data and you still don't know what to do, I would argue, and I think this is kind of an unpopular belief, but I think the answer is you haven't consumed enough data yet. Because I think that once you have enough, the path forward will be very clear. And if it's not clear, it just means you don't have enough. So that is not to say necessarily that you shouldn't act, because I think situations require us acting without knowing. But if you're trying to have the perfect scenario here, I think the answer is get more data that's quality and is actually getting to the heart of what matters, as opposed to being, because you can get all that muddied up with wrong data. Yeah.
Okay. Last question right here.
Cool. So I have 2 questions.
I said last 1 question.
All right. So I like the example you talked about with the company that had the editorial team that wanted to be very in control of like the art side of things, and you guys were able to compare that with the science side. The first one would be question is just pretty basic. Like, obviously you can't argue with results once they come in, but how did that company / you guys work to get that buy-in on that test? And then the second question, I guess is a little bit unrelated, but so obviously doing that kind of keyword research to fuel content in terms of like an organic traffic, like that's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Whenever you're talking about gated content, that isn't going to be a factor in organic results.
Yep.
Can you guys share some of your experience having keyword research fuel that for user experience?
Sure. So the first question, we didn't necessarily get buy-off. We've been working with a couple teams that have turned over, and this was something we were running with one team, and that had turned over. Now we're dealing with another team where we're using the data that we gained from that to work with this team. So it's a very complex relationship, and so I don't know that I can add much value there necessarily. I will say one thing that we've learned from that relationship is every single recommendation that we need to make, or that we make, has to come with some kind of business analysis. So I never want my marketers coming over and saying like, hey, you got a bunch of 301s, let's switch those to 302s, let's switch those to 301s, without also saying, and here's the anticipated effect on traffic. Or because frankly, if there is none, I'd rather them say, hey, there's a bunch of 302s, we could change to 301s, but frankly, it's not going to have a big effect, and so we don't recommend taking the time to do that. So I want them to think about like every recommendation they make with some level of business acumen, I would say. And then your last question, which is keyword research for stuff that's not search related necessarily. I think what the logic that we're pulling through here is that people are going to Google and they're asking for this thing, and so we're kind of using that. I think to bring up Seth Godin, he talked about survey and census. We're kind of using that as a survey to form a census of what people in general want. Like here are what people ask for on Google, so we can assume that they're a large part of a percentage of people that actually want this thing. I don't have any great examples for that I was involved in, but I do have a couple that I think are interesting. We have a friend, Brigham Dallas, who did keyword research, and he found out that there were a lot of people in Arizona who were searching for waxing salons, and there were not a lot of waxing salons to be found. So he actually started a waxing salon in Arizona, and this is like a 30-something hairy dude. Like this is not a waxing salon type guy. But now he owns, I believe, the largest chain of waxing salons in Arizona because of this. So that had nothing to do with search in terms of execution, but he used search to find out what people are desiring, what they really want, and then filling that need in a different way that wasn't search related. And another example, I was giving a presentation similar to this one in a class at BYU, an MBA class, and they had to work on a company as part of their like master thing. I don't know how they do stuff. Anyway, so I ended a little bit early, and so I said, let's do this. Like, let's do this keyword research. Does somebody want to, I'll do it on your company. And there was this company, they were producing these belts that were plastic. They were like rubber or something belts. And so we did a batch of keyword research, and we found there were like 10 to 15 keywords that were all about belts for skiing, like ski belts. And I had never heard of ski belts before, and neither had they. However, their belts were made out of rubber and would be a perfect ski belt. So they pivoted their entire company to, they don't sell belts anymore, they sell ski belts, and they were the ski belt company because there was a ton of volume around it. Difficulty was very low, which indicates that there's not a lot of great solutions out there. And so they changed their product, which again, is not necessarily search related. Yeah, they'll get a benefit from search, but it's more like people want this and they're not finding it. How can I give it to them? Which again goes back to like my whole thing is on great marketing is understanding who they are at their core, what will make their lives better, and how can we take that and mesh it with our business goals. That is like ultimate marketing in my opinion.